Y'all know what time it is. It is the one and the only Running with WARR. We three-man in it, three-man weaving this bad boy. We got Gabe coming up the middle. We got one of our newest runners, Steve, coming in on the right side. And then if you look at the screen directly, I'm on the left wing. But you know what? I prefer the left wing because I can do my pull-up jump shot and that buck and score that basketball I can that way. So it's all good either way. But as we three-man weaving this thing, we know we talk about all things basketball. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about, including this horrific rumor of us bringing in 7-foot big men that win defensive players of the years but have no offensive game. We're not even gonna say that for later on down the conversation. But right now, we got to start with what the real basketball is about right now with the NBA Finals. We got Game 1 and Game 2 that just recently just been played between the Golden State Warriors and the Boston Celtics. Don't get it twisted, y'all. I am wearing white and green, but you see it don't say Celtics on it. It says Lakers, which is weird considering if you're an LA Lakers fan. But, long story short, I'm not rooting for Boston, even though I got the colors on. I got Golden State to win this thing in 7. And between the first 2 games, it's kind of been up in the air. And I think the key for this specific matchup, guys, is based on how the role players play and the bench included. Because we know the stars are going to come out hitting on all cylinders. Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown going to do their thing. Steph, Clay, Draymond, they're going to do their thing overall as well. But how are the role players going to come out and play? Game 1, Boston annihilated Golden State in that category. Al Horford stepped up big. And other key players on that Boston Celtics team pretty much took over that reigns and annihilated the Warriors to get that Game 1 at the Chase Center. Big statement win. But the Warriors are also experienced, which is why they came back and beat Boston the way that they did with the emergence of their core, especially with Jordan Poole hitting from all cylinders, even from inside half court, with Steph Curry looking behind him like he's the proud big brother that my light-skinned brother is finally coming along. Don't worry, brother, I understand. So that being said, man, I think the rest of this series, role players going to determine who's going to win the series. And it's an uphill battle for both, but going into Boston, it's not a joke. It's no joke, even though I can't stand Boston for other reasons. At the end of the day, you're going into TD Garden House where it's going to be the Boston Garden where it's just legendary and it's hard to win basketball games. But I think the Warriors are prepared for it. Now, I'm a dishes assist to my boy Gabe, so I need you to make this shot for me and telling me, what are your thoughts on Game 1 and Game 2, and what should we expect from this series moving forward?
I thought Boston, in spite of their horrendous second half as a unit, I thought they got what they came there for, and that was a chance to go into San Francisco and get a split. They had an opportunity to win both games. I thought they had a moment or two in Game 2 where they were in control early, setting the tone. But one thing about Boston, and we seeing it, is with turnovers. And when they take care of the basketball, they typically in business, and they got a chance to control the floor of the game. The defense is always going to keep them in it, but I think they got real reckless and careless with the basketball the other night. On Sunday in Game 2, I thought the spacing, could have been a hell of a lot better offensively, and I think it had them discombobulated. Guys like Horford only taking a handful of shots. That has to change. He wasn't as aggressive. I give credit to Golden State for making the necessary adjustments. Draymond and Golden State, I thought they brought a level of physicality in Game 2 that they didn't bring in Game 1, and the Celtics failed to match that. And as a result, they got thrashed in the third quarter. Granted, Golden State, we know that over the years that's been their magic quarter, if you will, when they really go on a big time run and they insert their will on a ball game. But Boston proved in Game 1 that they can respond well to that. However, you can tell through the first 2 games, in spite of the Warriors, showcasing that they are the more experienced team, that Boston is not just going to run from them. And I think it's been an evenly played series thus far. And yeah, it'll come down to the role players. However, it's also going to come down to the stars as well. Jason Tatum, granted, he had a nice night shooting the basketball in Game 2, better than he did in Game 1. But in Game 1, you saw him get his teammates involved, and he finished the game with over 10 plus assists. Maybe he's going to have to figure out a way to mix it up, getting guys involved, and maybe not having to score as much in order to help the Celtics prevail in this series. I still think Boston, is the better team in this series. I'm not gonna shy away from that. I think they've been dominant through most of it, in spite of it being an evenly played series thus far. But they still got a chance. I think when Boston loses games, they beat themselves. The question is will they take care of the basketball and continue to, stick to the principles defensively?
That's very good points. Very good points. And I'm looking at my boy Steve over here. Is that a Dreamville shirt on? I think we kind of lost it.
Oh, yeah, you already know how I'm right.
Okay, I feel you. I feel
you
you,
know
Steve.
how I'm right.
Yes,
sir.
I feel you, bro. So, as you over here rocking with your Dreamville, shout out to J. Cole, who recently just played one of his professional games recently. Had a nice little show. I mean, anytime you can ever come out on the court as a sub with them playing your music in the background, that's so gangster. That's a whole other conversation in general. But I know, right? It's crazy. But we got to talk about this specific game still. And Steve gave it on a lot of points. But what are your keys that are necessary for not just Golden State to pull the series? Because I believe you have I believe you have the Warriors winning this series. What does the Warriors have to do to seal the deal moving forward after what you've seen between game 1 and game 2?
I think the main thing that the Warriors have to do, and this is regards to both sides of the ball, is just dictate. They got to dictate pace. They got to dictate how things are scheduled defensively for the Celtics offensively, and then they got to dictate terms offensively and in terms of forcing the Celtics to guard them in ways that they're either not accustomed to or they're uncomfortable doing. So the main ways that they're able to do that is pretty much what they showed in game 2 alone, where first of all defensively they started switching a little bit more, and the switching 1 through 5 kind of started playing with the Celtics lineups because them typically being comfortable playing with Horford and Williams at the 4 and the 5 kind of started working against them because all of the switching from the Warriors started taking away the pick and roll for the Celtics. So they ran a lot less pick and roll than they're typically accustomed to doing. So taking away that entity of their offense, in turn stagnated ball movement, and it led to a whole lot of plays, a whole lot of possessions where sets weren't being ran. So now we're seeing a lot of isolations, a lot of extra passing with no agenda behind it, and then they end up getting the shot display that they got, which was Horford taking only a handful of shots, and then other players not taking as many shots as they would like, and like I said, that can be said. It can be a mindset thing for the Celtics, or you can kind of flip that. You can kind of flip your perspective on it and look at what did the Warriors do for the Celtics to get that shot variety in general that they ended up having at the end of game 2. You can also look at how the Warriors kind of switched up what they were doing with Draymond Green defensively. So typically he's like their roamer. They'll put him on the quote unquote weakest offensive player, or weakest shooter at least, allow him to play help side, show through to one side, and just kind of play center field and roam with no true responsibility. And then everybody else and trust on their defense on the weak side can zone up, and they can kind of play with things with X outs and different things of that nature on the weak side of the ball. What they did this time was they still had that entity, but they also were able to put him on Jaylen Brown. So now Jaylen Brown is arguably the Celtics' best catch and shoot 3-point shooter, and he's definitely their best off-ball movement shooter. So you put Draymond on him, so now that's taking away another entity of your offense to where, okay, if we want to run a pick and roll with, let's say, Robert Williams and Jason Tatum after some dummy action, and then put Jaylen Brown one pass away, oh, wait, who's one pass away defending that? That's Draymond, one of the best defenders, one of the best help defenders, one of the best anchors in the league. So that subtle little twist in where Draymond is defensively is just unlocked a lot of havoc for the Warriors to wreak defensively. On top of him still being able to do his roaming whenever Jaylen Brown's off the ball, when he was one pass away, which is what the Celtics typically like to do. When Draymond's there, that takes away an entire driving lane and a passing option in general. So now, again, the Celtics are off script. They're scrambling in the late clock, taking bad shots, or shots that they didn't necessarily, want to go to. And it was just that little subtle change in where Draymond is defensively, on top of the upped activity as a whole from the Warriors, that really just discombobulated the Celtics offense. And then we ended up seeing what we saw from them with the live ball turnovers, especially, which is, as we all know, is one of the biggest cardinal sins you can have against the Warriors, especially at home, because they get in transition. They got these guys filling the lane, not to just get to the basket, but to shoot threes. That's momentum. That's the crowd getting involved. And just in general, it's just a snowball effect of things that you don't want, and now especially being on the road against them. So it was a bad game for the Celtics for all intents and purposes. Jaylen Brown, of course, didn't have a good game. Jason Tatum had a good first half, but it felt like a lot of his shots, they were kind of like giving him the hat tip to him. Like, okay, if you're going to hit these tough shots, that's cool. We're going to make you work for them. And you're also taking your offense out of the flow because no one else is touching the ball, really. And we saw that evident by like we talked about the amount of shots that other guys were taking. So I'm just looking at the Warriors dictating terms pretty much in an all-encompassing manner, even more so defensively than anything. But that in turn allowed them to establish their flow going over to the other end offensively, both in transition and in the half court. And then in the half court offense especially, they were able to have that key dynamic that arose during that Maverick series, which was generating offensive rebound after offensive rebound. And if you're getting Steph Curry drives on top of the Warriors' ball movement, and then you're getting Klay Thompson and Jordan Poole punches and bounds from deep and all over the court, and you're allowing the Warriors to get offensive rebounds, there's no avenue for you to win through that. So I just feel like the Celtics kind of lost their grip in terms of having their punch in terms of dictating things within the game. And that kind of snowballed into what we saw in game two, especially in the second half more than anything else.
Yeah, man. Those are all valuable points as well. And you gave a lot of explanation as far as this isn't just applicable to the Warriors, but to the Celtics as well within their own ways. I think the biggest thing for both of them too, especially from the Warriors, because they have such a history, especially when it comes to these playoffs currently, is turning the ball over, and not just from defensively, but careless turnovers, unforced turnovers where they just give the ball up just because, or the bad pass here and there. Like obviously we understand their offense flows differently. It's very free and moving, which is, fun to watch and fun to have, and it works well for the Warriors as their bread and butter. But the bread has to be a little soft too, so the butter can spread pretty smooth. And the Warriors just don't sometimes lose that smoothness when they turn the ball over, and it keeps giving the other teams live. And Boston's a team, if you keep giving them chance after chance after chance, they're eventually going to click and take over. And that's something that the Warriors have to watch out, especially, I believe, going into game 3, where they don't have the home court, they're not going to be home, not have the home court advantage, not going to have any fans. It's going to be a rocking Boston Garden, completely different environment on the road. Obviously, the Warriors know what it's like to be in those environments, but at the same time, this is a different Boston Celtics team that they're probably accustomed to playing in. So I think as long as the Warriors limit the turnovers, they'll always have a good chance of winning their games, especially against Boston. But unfortunately, especially on the road, they're carefree half the time, to a point where they have all these turnovers, and it keeps teams close in the games. As we transition to game 3, specifically happening later on this week, Gabe, starting with you, what do you think, or what do you expect to happen and take place in game 3 for either team, and who do you think is going to take on the W?
Well, what I expect first and foremost is for Jaylen Brown to continue to be aggressive and assertive, looking for his. Yeah, granted, he had a bad finish to the game, but I think through the first 5.5 to 6 minutes in game 2, we saw Jaylen Brown at his best. Making threes, getting inside the lane. I know a lot of talk has been going on about his handle throughout the playoffs, and rightfully so. But in spite of that, he was managing to help get things done for Boston. So I expect Jaylen Brown to be aggressive and to continue that going into quarter 1. I also expect Jason Tatum to be as well. I get your point when you talk about if Golden State takes better care of the basketball, that they will be in games. That's a fact. However, Klay Thompson also has to continue to be as effective as he showcased he could be in that third quarter. And he has to do that consistently all 48 minutes. He didn't can come through and rise to the occasion as he showed in the second half on Sunday night, then I think they have a chance. But with all of that said, I still think that, Boston, with this being their first home game in the finals in 12 years, I think their crowd is going to be very excited and pumped up. Granted, it'll be some Warrior fans in the building, I'm sure, but I don't think it'll be as many as compared to, those in the green and white. So I expect the Celtics to respond valiantly. I expect Udoka and his coaching staff, to have those guys prepared and watching film, because Steven brought up a great point when he was talking about how the Warriors did a great job of getting out in transition and forcing Celtic turnovers. But it also comes down to taking better care of the basketball. I expect Derek White and the role players, Marcus Smart included, to be better. Marcus Smart only had like 2 points in game 2. I expect him to be a lot more aggressive as well early on, seeking to find his shot, if not setting up others for easy opportunities.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. Give your game 3 your outlook on game 3, what to expect, and who do you think is going to take the W on with this go around?
So I feel like, and rightfully so, and understandably so, Marcus Smart gets a lot of attention for his defensive efforts, multiple efforts, his IQ on that end, and just him being like an anchor from the perimeter for that team. And a lot of people kind of don't see or don't notice, at least, the efforts and so getting others involved. And just in it wasn't a good game. It was an uncharacteristic game for the most part from him. So I'm expecting him with a couple of days off from game 2 to game 3, and then being back at home as well. I'm expecting for him to have a great game, for him to reverse his fortunes that he saw from game 2, going into game 3 in the friendly confines of the crib, and just for him to have more juice. So him having more juice is going to mean him not only being able to chase and do all of the things that he does defensively, either off the ball and chasing guys, or at the point of attack on ball. For him to be able to take those same efforts and be able to apply himself offensively, generating those drives and paint touches which they need in the worst way, which they didn't have in game 2. And then seeing him in turn be able to move the ball to guys, allowing for second drives and wide open shots, just generating offense and forcing the Warriors defense to move and, pulling at the strings of their help defense and just in general, just keeping things in flow for their offense from the point of attack more than anything else. So I'm expecting Marcus Smart to have a good game in return. That'll leak into the rest of the Celtics, getting guys involved organically and on script. And then they'll end up playing better. I don't know if they're necessarily going to win that game because the Warriors have found things as well. As hard as it is going to be for the Celtics to counter, and as hard as it's going to be for the Warriors to kind of mimic those same fortunes that they saw in game 2, I feel like with them having just any sort of rhythm in terms of figuring out how to attack that vaunted Celtics defense, them finding things that should be translatable from game 2 to game 3, I feel like that's going to give them a great chance to win. And I actually think they're going to go ahead and take game 3 of this series behind continued, paint touches from Steph Curry, them finding ways to get Clay involved and him finding his rhythm shooting. Draymond being Draymond on offense and defense, and just in general, them showing that cohesiveness that's been the staple and signature of that team.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, man. I expect the Warriors to come out here and make a bold statement, especially after the way they got in their own way and form, a little humiliated after game 1. I think they're going to bounce back, and it's going to be a close game, but I believe they're going to probably win within that 5-point range at the Garden. Game 3 is happening on Wednesday. We're recording this on a Tuesday, but it's happening now but the game is happening on a Wednesday, so be on the lookout for that. 9 p.m. Eastern on ABC. So be on the lookout for that. And as we transition into different topics within the NBA, we can talk about the Bulls because we are from Chicago and this is home, right? So let's talk about the Bulls, even though the season's over with because of recent speculation of the offseason so far has been all over the place. You have rumors about Zach LaVine potentially leaving and who he might be partnering up with. But aside from that, the biggest rumor came today with reports coming out that the Bulls are most likely going to see what they can do to pursue and get Utah Jazz center Rudy Gobert to the Windy City. And as much we need that defense, as much we need that anchor, especially in the paint, and we need rebounding. Good Lord, let's not get it from Rudy Gobert. Let's not go that route. The only reason why is because he has a limited offensive game, and Billy Donovan's offense is built for, and from an offensive perspective, he needs to participate in that. Rudy Gobert doesn't fit that. And it doesn't fit the Bulls schematically when it comes to versatility. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing we have to acknowledge is the elephant in the room, which is, bro, you have a stupid huge contract you just signed where you're getting paid to a 25, 30, almost 30 million a year. That's only going to go up down the line with the salary cap increasing. I mean, I get it. But for a center to get paid that much money and not produce anything on the offensive end per se that can fit within a Billy Donovan offense, where especially if you're coming off a Billy Donovan offense that once had Vucevic, who can actually at least shoot the three, who at least can expand the floor in different ways and give the Bulls a different option. Versatility goes both ways, not just defensively but offensively as well. And bringing in Rudy Gobert would dismantle that. Especially when you're talking about trying to bring in Zach LaVine on a max contract next year. Or this offseason. So I would not be a fan of getting Rudy Gobert, especially at this present time, to Chicago. I'm more of a Mitchell Robinson guy. You can get Mitchell Robinson from he at least has a decent expanded game from an offense perspective. Not where we want to be, but he can give something at least. And he does bring that young intensity from a defensive perspective, protects the paint, and he can rebound. I think having him and then bringing a solid backup can help with that paint perspective. But Rudy just is not the answer for the Bulls, especially right now with the way that contract is looking for no offensive game at all. I just would not pull the trigger on that. And I hope they fix that situation in Utah because you already know their coach is gone. So, all right, so with him being gone, I best believe and feel like Donovan Mitchell's going to be right next. So Rudy may actually want to stay because that might be his team. But who knows? Sticking to the Bulls, though, man. Steve, I'm going to go to you on this, man. Is Rudy Gobert the answer to our defensive and rebounding problems in Chicago, and is he worth the risk of going after this trade?
All right, so the discourse around Rudy Gobert, it's been just growingly it's gross. It's gross. I just gotta put it say it for how I see it. It's gross. Yes, some of the things that have been said are extremely apt. Outside of screening, offensive rebounds, and being a vertical spacer, he doesn't offer much offensively. However, the caveat to that, we look at guys like Robert Williams is an exception in a sense because he has a knack for making passes that most centers or front court pieces can't typically do. But outside of his passing value that he adds to the offense, which the Celtics never use because they're spaced out around the floor, including another better passer with Al Horford next to him. They hardly ever use that that skill set. So it's really of no true value outside of late clock scenarios. So Robert Williams is like, I feel like Williams and the Celtics in general are kind of like a case in point for the Bulls. If you look at both rosters, they have a lot of similarities as far as having a defensive-minded guard or two, and like a Derek White and Marcus Smart. You compare those two to Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso. You're getting the same thing in terms of having two anchor-type guys for your defense on the perimeter. You look at Robert Williams. If you add Rudy Gobert to the Bulls, you kind of see that obvious mirroring of rosters. And then you look at Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, and then you add to that Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. So now you're starting to see all of these similarities that the two teams have. The main difference in the 2021-2022 season between the Celtics and the Bulls was the fact that one team had a arguably defensive player of the year caliber center front court piece, and one team didn't. One team played 5-out ball. The other team had one center on the court at all times, if not two front court pieces. So in turn, you look at the defenses of the two. The Bulls had a top end defense when they were healthy, but they had that one extra step that they couldn't necessarily take in the paint because they didn't have a rim protector in general. So you all of that to say, especially including the pieces that it would take to attain a all world talent, the likes of Rudy Gobert, one of the best of big men the league has ever seen, statistically and via the eye test. Um, Giving up just Vucevic, Patrick Williams, and pick compensation. If you can get away with attaining a talent the likes of him for, and I'm not going to say just that because that's a hefty price to pay, but kind of comparing what the production and just the overall outlook of balance and viability you give your defense is definitely worth the risk because you add anchor to a team that had troubles as far as containing the ball from the perimeter outside of Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso consistently. You add that paint presence to it. Now, those two guys who were arguably not even arguably, they were the best defensive backcourt in the NBA and two of the top, I would say, 8 defenders for that first, 2.5, 3 months of the season. You add to that an elite, the best rim protector on top of that, that makes the defense that much better. And then you, in turn, you play in transition more, which is something that the Bulls couldn't do in the second half of the season because they couldn't generate and sustain stops on the defensive end. You add to that the transition element. Rudy Gobert is excellent in transition as a rim runner and a vertical spacer using his athleticism to change ends of the floor, beat his man to the rim, and either hit rim runs for early look aheads at the basket or obviously the vertical spacing, which is something that Lonzo Ball is adept at. He's one of the 5 best lob passers in the league. He wasn't able to showcase that talent this season much outside in transition to Levine or to DeRozan or Javante Green on occasion because the Bulls don't have somebody for him to throw those lobs to in the half court. You add Rudy Gobert, who's an elite screener. He can flip screens. You can set ram screens for him where someone's setting a screen for him to eventually get to the screen, which in turn puts the defensive pick and roll coverage out of position. Now he's rolling to the basket, and you can hit him on a second side pass to him for a oop, or it could be a direct oop from Lonzo Ball. I'm just trying to paint a picture of what the offense would look like with Rudy Gobert. There's a lot of options you can go to, and the Bulls have multiple playmakers, which can help get him the ball and facilitate to him in positions where he can be successful. That's something that the Utah Jazz have not had, and really any of the renditions since he's become a player in the league. They've had one specific playmaker, and Michael Conley, he's good, but he's an undersized guard, so it's harder for him to make a lot of those passes, especially in the playoffs, to get a guy like Rudy Gobert involved, who's kind of a one-trick pony in terms of vertical spacing, and that's it on offense and scoring variety. So looking at that and kind of changing that perspective from the trollish thoughts to looking at how he can actually be a key card for the Bulls, I feel like this is an absolute yes. You have to do this deal if you can, and you work on the fringes of your roster outside of that after you add him to what you already have. You keep Lonzo, you keep Caruso, you keep Zach, you bring Zach back, and you keep and you just add floor space and experienced veterans around that group. That's a very solid piece that not only raises your floor but raises your ceiling. And when you're a contending team, you're not looking at horror picks. You're not looking to
Oh, okay. I think we lost
We
Steve in
we
there.
lost.
Yeah, go ahead, Gabe. Steve brought up a lot of good points, but I want to hear your perspective from this.
I'm gonna say this in reference to Steven's points. He makes a lot of great points. Rudy Gobert is always among the league leaders in screen assist and whatnot. However, in spite of the points he brings up, to play devil's advocate, how often do the Bulls really run pick and roll?
Can I answer that real quick?
Yeah, go ahead. But go ahead. I mean, because I don't see it much. And then Billy is willing to open up his playbook to the level of which Quin Snyder is oftentimes.
So to answer that question directly, the Bulls didn't run a ton of pick and roll, but
Exactly.
that's because they weren't using Nikola Vucevic the right way. Like they had an all world talent at center last season in itself with Vucevic, and there were games where he struggled to even get touches and specifically in positions where he can actually showcase his skill. So if you have an all-world center, you're not necessarily using him to the extent that you should when you're healthy. You know, you take a center that's less apt in terms of being able to do more things. He's good at a few concise things, so you use him for those key things, and you integrate more pick and roll, which is another thing that the Bulls half-court offense needed, especially when they weren't healthy. You know, so using that pick and roll should be something that's increased moving forward for Billy Donovan, and adding Rudy Gobert in place of Vucevic and doing so there makes them a little more dynamic, in my opinion. Take away the shooting, yes, but you add that roller. That's pressure being generated. Somebody's gonna have to account for him, whether it's the pick and roll defender that's guarding Gobert or the low man. That in turn gonna open up shooters for the Bulls. I'm just thinking about it from that perspective.
No doubt, but and I agree, they do need to open up the playbook more and allow pick and roll. And you talk about how they weren't using Vucevic the right way, and in my opinion, sometimes they weren't using Lonzo the right way, because Lonzo showed when he was in New Orleans that he could run a pick and roll with Zion. But you know, with all that said, I'm gonna bring up the numbers in which Rudy's getting over the next 4 years, money wise: 38.1 million, 22-23, 41 million, 23-24. He's also getting as I just lost it, but I got it back up now. He's getting 43.8, 24-25, 46.6 million player option, 25-26. That's a lot of money to be paying a limited bid, especially when I see bigs in the draft, such as Mark Williams out of Duke, who possess the same skill set that a Rudy Gobert does, who can also be a defensive anchor, who can also be a good rim runner and a roller, and a guy who can also get down and defend guards out of pick and roll switches. He's not afraid to play against them. As much as I like Rudy Gobert, and I do think I do appreciate the fact that AK and Mark are at least trying to go star hunting, I think it's very tough to give up a guy like Patrick Williams when you're thin on wing depth for the services of a Rudy Gobert who's limited offensively. That's not a knock on Rudy Gobert. He's one of the best defenders in the league, and I do believe if you were to bring him to Chicago with Lonzo and Caruso being your anchors on the perimeter with him, yeah, you go from a top 10 defense to automatically top 5 or 3 in the league. They would be very exciting to watch, and he can also cover a lot of ground and help out in areas where Zach ain't willing to do it, or DeMar may not be able to as well, and other guys. But I find that a hard move to do. And Vucevic, like you said, he provides versatility. You can play with him in a pick and pop. Mitchell Robinson is another guy I would go after over Rudy because, one, he's younger. And Mitchell has shown the ability to actually expand his game to a certain degree. Like, he has a little outside shot, 15 to 18 foot range. He can, he's a good rim runner. He's a roller. It's so many bigs that, even like I would even take a chance on a guy like Clint Capella if I'm gonna make a trade for a big over Rudy, because he's just as good as well when it comes to setting screens and rolling to the rim. And I mean, those bigs, you can find those type of big men. I'm not saying that Rudy Gobert isn't a great big in his own right, but I just feel like when you're thin on wing depth, you can't trade a guy like Patrick Williams away unless if you're getting a top 15 player back in return. If you really want to go big game hunting, if you the Bulls, like, I can understand it maybe if it was like somebody like Bradley Beal on the table. But Rudy Gobert with that contract, and I understand scare money don't make no money, but you also got to think smart, because once you get Zach on a max deal, now you got 3 guys under max contracts, or 2 if you get them. You got Zach and you got Rudy Gobert. And that kind of leaves you thin. And that third max guy who you bring in is definitely going to have to be a bucket getter. And a guy on the wing that can provide them with some instant offense. Because as much as I like the Bulls, and I think they're getting tougher, and I think they have what it takes to take that next step moving forward, once they get a couple more pieces, Rudy, I don't like his fit here, because I don't think Billy is willing to open up and expand upon his playbook. It was different when he had Russell Westbrook. I think Russell's a guy who forces you to do that. I don't know if Lonzo's that type of guy yet, and Lonzo, I think he's talented enough to be a guy that leads the league in assists one day, but I don't know. Like I said on the show many times, I think Billy did a great job this season with the pieces that he had and the injuries, being off and on throughout the year. But we really about to see what Billy Donovan is made of. And if you get Rudy Gobert here, your offense is gonna have to open up the playbook a little bit to get him involved and to make sure that you maximizing the asset that you have in him.
Yeah, guys. Bleacher Report, Jake Fisher, NBA writer, that recently came up with this article stating that not only are the Bulls a potential destination for Gobert, but it's also the Hawks and the Raptors that are showing interest. So if you talk about maybe you mentioned Gabe going after maybe a Clint Capella, you could do a 3-team trade maybe, but the Jazz choose to go that route and get younger, trading some picks here and there. You bring Capella over to Chicago while Rudy goes to Atlanta. That could be a difference maker too, if they were, especially for Atlanta, considering that they're trying to not only go after Rudy Gobert, but also go after Jeremy Grant, which are and DeAndre Ayton. There's a lot of potential options out there for the Bulls to look into when it comes to filling this specific role from a center perspective, man. And like I'm with Gabe, I just don't know, that price is too steep, man. Especially if you already got scare money don't make no money, but there's risk with all that. And Mark Eversley and AK are known now for taking risk, but it has to be very strategic. So I can't see them making a move after Rudy Gobert without knowing in the back of their minds they're gonna have to get some additional other pieces to go with that, while also re-signing Zach LaVine. So we'll just see how it goes. We know how AK and Emmy are good at and what they do. And they have shown that they're willing to at least go that extra mile to figure out what's next. I'd rather take that than what the hell we just experienced with Gar Paxson over the past decade. That being said,
he could fit though. You know what Gobert could fit, and I'm shocked that they haven't been in the reports and the rumors. Charlotte needs a big like him who can anchor and protect the rim. And LaMelo, he'll find you, and he's gonna play in the pick and roll. And when you look at the guys that are being interviewed out of Charlotte, from Kenny Atkinson, Mike D'Antoni, it's obvious that they're going after an offensive-minded coach who's gonna open up the playbook and let LaMelo be great at what it is that he does, and that's getting out in transition and running and gunning. And Rudy is suited for that. I think here it would be a hell of a lot of pressure on him. Whereas, you go down south a little bit, income tax is not as high, the fans not is rowdy. No disrespect to Charlotte, but Charlotte has had a tough time in recent years getting fans to come out to the gate prior to LaMelo getting there. It's just a different feel. He come here, he got to come with it off the gate, and it's gonna be tough, especially when you got a team that is really trying to vie for a championship within the next couple years with a young nucleus.
I feel like Rudy can be the piece to a championship team, but he has to have the offensive weaponry around him to facilitate him appropriately, and B, he has to have the appropriate weapons defensively around him for his impact to be as great as it could possibly be, and for in turn their impact to be as good as it can be. And I feel like there's a perfect marriage there as far as balance, offensively and defensively. You having issues with your defense this past season at the rim. You had one of the best rim protectors ever in that, regardless of the price. And then in turn on offense, you're able to offset his weaknesses, based off of the skills you have around him and playmakers to keep him involved in everything. So it's definitely, like you said, Josh, there's a lot of different risks and everything involved with either proposition to this. But just the fact that the Bulls have transitioned from never being involved in any rumors in regards to players that make even have sense to the team to now being involved in almost every rumor possible, that's a nice step in the right direction. It's rather refreshing, I'll say.
I can agree with you there.
Oh yeah, most definitely. And as from a pressure perspective, Gabe, that's a good point about bringing Gobert here. He has to be able to live up to the expectations that's going to be set here. But I will say, if MJ messes around and brings Gobert with the right coach from an offensive perspective to Charlotte, putting that with Melo, that raises stakes even higher. So
they got to get a big. They got to get a big. Like Steven brought up a lot of great points comparing the Celtics to the Bulls. I see some similarities with the Bulls and the Hornets. The only difference is the Bulls have defensive anchors on the perimeter. I think Charlotte is still a much younger team trying to learn how to win and how to defend at a high level. They got guys with the potential to do it. They just got to get a coach that come up in there or assistant and be like, hey, if you want to win, this is what's required. And I think they need a vet of Rudy Gobert's caliber to come into that city and show those guys what it takes to win. I think Gobert can be a championship caliber piece as well. But like you said, Steven, he has to have shooters around him and a lot of great offensive weaponry. The Bulls are still trying to add shooters, outside of Zach and DeMar. I mean, you got Kobe White, but they're still trying to find out what their roster intel looks like outside of their two co-stars.
And that's a good point that you mentioned. Let's transition to the other side of the NBA where you're talking about a lot from NBA players potentially being hired for certain teams, but you also got some potential that, from a coach perspective, they need hirings too. Quin Snyder has officially left the Utah Jazz. You also have, on the WNBA side, you got Derek Fisher, who just lost his job. So so he just lost his job from being the GM and the head coach for the LA Sparks. But Charlotte is one of those teams that is searching for a coach, like you just said. Obviously, they're going for the offensive mindset, but who is the ideal fit for the Charlotte Hornets and based on where they're trying to go? Because the coach not only has to bring an offensive mindset, but they also got to bring some maturity in this because last time I checked, Miles Bridges is definitely drinking lean on Instagram. I don't know what's going on with that. So because of that, you got to be able to handle the on the court, but off the court duties with drinking lean too. So who is the coach that ideally fits building a culture in Charlotte? Like, who is the type of guy that you can not only play for, but actually build and grow to help mature these young guys that are currently on this roster that are the nucleus for the way this team and the core for this team to go moving forward?
In my opinion, I don't know if he's a guy who can be like a father figure to him, but from a basketball standpoint, making sure that guys are on their P's and Q's ready to come on to work. I wouldn't mind seeing Mike D'Antoni in this situation, and I'll tell you why. He's a guy who knows how to maximize the most out of his point guards. We seen it in Phoenix with Steve Nash. I got a chance to see it, in person with Houston when he had James Harden. He pretty much moved him from the shooting guard spot to the point guard spot, letting him create on the offensive end. I would love to see him with LaMelo Ball. And see what he does from an X's and O's standpoint, because I really believe that offense could take off. They've already been, to me, a top 10 or 15 team, like top 10, 15 team to watch on League Pass on a nightly basis. If you watch the league every night, I think they could elevate if they brought Mike D'Antoni in there. Quin Snyder, I would like to see Quin Snyder in there as well. But if you get a guy like Mike D'Antoni, my only thing is with him, you got to bring a defensive coordinator type of guy into the equation. That assistant has to be a defensive-minded first assistant, because Mike is so offensive heavy with his game plans and whatnot, to the point where I'm not going to say he doesn't care about it, but he can kind of lose track of it sometimes. So I would really like to see either Mike D'Antoni there or Quin Snyder. They definitely need to give Quin Snyder a look. I know Kenny Atkinson is in that top two, but I think with Quin leaving Utah, they may have to wait a couple weeks longer to see who their guy truly is moving forward.
Yeah, that's a good point. Go ahead, Steve.
For me, it's Kenny Atkinson. I feel like he's the perfect target to have as far as being in the final rounds of their interviews and decision making for this vacant coaching spot. And I feel like he's the best decision here, because for as great as Mike D'Antoni's been, he's always had multiple established veterans to run his system. We've yet to see him with any young, like youthful, right type players that are still, in terms of their skill and ingratiation to the NBA level, developing their skills, developing their brands, and all of these things. He's not an ego manager in any capacity. So this situation where you have a LaMelo Ball, a Miles Bridges, a PJ Washington, Terry Rozier, and all these other young players, even a Gordon Hayward, he's a vet, but he still has his needs as far as a player. You have all of these pieces that you have to kind of make deposits to individually as a coach to appease everybody and keep a conducive win environment, not just on the floor but mentally for those guys. That's not Mike's cup of tea. As far as at least his history suggests. What makes sense most for me with Kenny Atkinson is we can look at his most recent stint as a head coach with the Brooklyn Nets. Before they got Kevin Durant and before they got Kyrie Irving, it was Kenny Atkinson there with a young Karis LeVert, a young D'Angelo Russell, a young Jared Allen, and all
Spencer
these
Dinwiddie.
other young pieces. Yeah, he had Spencer there. He had Joe Harris there. He had all these younger versions of themselves now in 2022. He had them, before they became the players that they are now. And he had them all in one environment, and they were all playing at a high level to the point where they made the playoffs. And what he did with that team, especially even defensively, which we didn't really expect for that roster to have any like punching defensively, but they had that juice and then some under the tutelage of Atkinson. I just feel like this scenario suggests his intangibles as a coach, and all that we've seen from him production wise as a coach, they all suggest that he should be the decision that they end up finalizing to go with. And of course they gotta solve that issue at center as we talked about in the last segment. But I just feel like he's the perfect coach to have because he can manage all of those younger egos. He has a track record of doing so, and just in general, he's just a different style coach that I feel like fits the way that their roster is set up at the moment.
It would be a hell of an opportunity for him. I tell you that because I know he's been itching to get back into the head coaching ranks and to be in, Charlotte with an opportunity, to get to the playoffs. That would be a hell of an opportunity for him. I wouldn't be in objection to that at all. And Kenny does know how to work well with young rosters. And Mike is more of a veteran-laden type of guy. Very laid back, not known to really have shoot arounds for his guys and stuff like that. That would have to change if he went to Charlotte for damn sure. Yeah, he would definitely have to do a lot of hard working and coaching on those guys.
And Kenny's last opportunity was cut short, if y'all remember specifically, because he decided to play Jared Allen, who in 2020, 2019 was definitely better than DeAndre Jordan at the time, but the front office didn't see it that way. So they ended up getting him out of there, unfortunately, and then DeAndre Jordan, who's been on a decline the last 3-4 seasons, and it's been an abrupt decline, while Jared Allen's ascended to one of the top 7-8 centers in the league, and he was just an all-star this season. He'll put the Cavaliers on the map defensively after they, acquired his talent. So just kind of looking at how it was cut short for him there, I feel like this would be a kind of the NBA world kind of just giving him a new opportunity and some good karma, saying here's another opportunity with a group of young talents that you can kind of do the same thing with, and with the franchise that kind of has an open mentality as far as not having pressure on them. Similar scenario to where the Brooklyn Nets were at that time. So kind of paying it forward in a sense for him.
Yeah, Kenny Atkinson, I think, will be a great asset, like you mentioned, Steve. He led the Nets in the 2019 to the playoffs with that, and that was the year that turned D'Angelo Russell into a max player. Before he ended up maybe an All-Star, before he ended up getting that part of that trade, that sign and deal trade that brought Kevin Durant to the Brooklyn Nets. But there's some other coaching situations that took place. We obviously know about the Jazz and Quin Snyder being gone, but the Lakers themselves hired Darvin Ham, former Bucks assistant, as their head coach. And there's a lot of speculation per se, how they're gonna make this work, especially with Russell Westbrook. Having a guy like Darvin Ham there, who has experience with superstars, not just playing against superstars. Because I mean, he did play against LeBron James, and he's still one of the top 2 best players in the league after all these years. So he played against LeBron. He played against top tier talent. Part of those bad boy Detroit Piston teams that won that had those championship Eastern Conference Finals runs. But at the same time, He's also coached them. I mean, he coached Giannis to being a champion as an assistant coach. So he knows what it takes to work with stars to get them to that next level. And on top of that, you retain Phil Handy, who I think is a key part to this entire Lakers roster moving forward, because of the respect that the stars have for Phil Handy. They love working when training with him. And on top of that, his expertise that he brings to the game. So to be able to have those components in place, and just from the way he spoke at this press conference, I think he will find a way to make it work with all three of those guys, especially if Anthony Davis can stay healthy and if Russell Westbrook can be the Russell Westbrook of old. I think there is a slight chance, and I do have hope in Darvin Ham to help at least put this franchise back in the right direction that it needs to go. What was your guys' reactions? I'll start with you, Steve. What was your guys' reactions regarding the hiring of Darvin Ham, and where does this really take the Lakers moving forward?
Well, I feel like the Lakers are a looming question mark right now. They don't know what they want to do with their roster in terms of are they going to keep Russ? Are they going to trade? The allure of the Lakers is not what it typically is because they haven't succeeded to the extent that they, suggested they would after winning the championship in the bubble. They went from the championship in the bubble to a first round exit last season to missing the playoffs entirely this season. So, in terms of just looking at things from a perspective of trends, they're trending downward. And on top of that, their best player is LeBron James, and as all encompassing as his dominance is, he's on the decline of his career as well. Now, obviously, for players like him, P3, or even like a Steph Curry, when they hit that 31, 32, 33 and older age, yes, they see regression, but they're a lot more, than most other talents are of the superstar, realm. So, yes, they have an older LeBron, but they also have to make sure that there's full talents around them. And this is all into having a coach. I was of the group of fans and kind of outside on-seers for the Lakers, or for the Lakers, excuse me, for just looking in terms of their coaching. And I feel like it wasn't the issue last season. I feel like it was culture, or if you want to say it was just the players, not as far as the front office putting together a roster that didn't necessarily make the most sense in terms of the league is right now and the elite. So I'm just kind of up in arms about their coach situation. I'm glad they found a piece that they feel comfortable with, but at the same time, is that piece going to be changes the lack of effort that they saw defensively, the lack of continuity they saw offensively? Like the main issue for me, outside of their defense and the individual continuity on offense, and that was for their season's entirety, regardless of who was and wasn't in the lineup. And as far as having shooters and things that didn't fit, optically it didn't fit for them because you could see off of body language that they just didn't vibe with each other. So no changes have been made to the roster in terms of that as far as relevant pieces. And the one looming question mark still continues to be Russell Westbrook. So they need to stamp a decision on him, regardless of who the coach is in place, and in turn, flip their roster and align it with that more than anything else, in my opinion.
Yeah, well said. I mean, when I look at the Darvin Ham hire, I mean, I like it. He's a guy that's gonna be straightforward and honest with his players. He's not gonna have no agendas or no BS at the door. You know what you're gonna get. He's gonna push his guys. I like the fact that he's brought in Rasheed Wallace alongside of retaining Phil Handy. I think that'd be great for a lot of the young players that have experience, vets in the locker room, guys who have not only won, or in Darvin's case, he's won as a coach in the league as an assistant, but won as players. I think that's a great thing to bring into a locker room. But with all of that said, I still got a lot of questions about this roster. And I think that's the first order of business that the Lakers front office has to take care of, is finding that decision as to what they do with Russ. And the offseason meeting, Russ, should they seek to, keep him, the offseason meetings have to be very key. Because I think Russ, as great as he is, in order for him to work in Los Angeles, he's gonna have to learn how to play off of the ball more, and that he's gonna have to be willing to cut. You know, if the jump shot's not falling or whatever, he's also got to be willing at times to be a catch and shoot option just to keep the defense honest. He can't pass up, you know, wide open 3-point shots just to drive in when defenders are seeking to close in and collapse in the paint. He has to get comfortable. I think they also got to get some guys in there that value playing defense. I think last year everybody in the league found out the biggest secret to beating this Lakers roster. You dare them to shoot from 3, you make them run, and you get the game up. Once you make them run and you get on like you going like a 12-0 run, they're gonna get so tired to where they calling timeouts. And once you let that crowd in it, you pretty much done. You know, everybody knew the secret. Let them shoot, collapse the paint, and get out and run when you get the rebound. And I think they got to get a little bit more younger. They got to get a little bit more athletic. AD and LeBron cannot do it alone. I think they had a real good roster in spite of being a first-round exit with role players like Harrell, Caruso, Kuzma, who was starting to really value and embrace being a role player in the league before finding his stride again in Washington as a secondary ball handler. You know, those guys, they had a nice nucleus and they let a lot go for us. And they went all in on offense. And it was an experiment that didn't work. So I think that this roster has to be worked on to some extent. Rob, they still got their job in their hands full because in spite of the championship and the bubble, LeBron's been there for 4 seasons. You've missed the playoffs 2 out of the first 4 seasons of the LeBron James era. It's not a good look. To me, this is the biggest year of the LeBron James era in Los Angeles, and it's going to determine where the franchise goes moving forward, in my opinion.
Yeah, those are all very good points. And as we get ready to slowly wrap this thing up, I want to just highlight real briefly about the WNBA. The Sky have been on a roll as of late, taking over the East. And Steve, obviously, you know, you've been as one of the guys that's been going to the games, covering the games, things of that sort. Just real briefly highlight on the impact that the Sky is having, not just within in the East, but also within the league as a whole. I think they're starting to slowly find their gel with all the new players coming in. I still think Emma Meeson is still the question mark as far as how she's going to come along with from a chemistry perspective and how she fits in, especially offensively with this team. But over time, you could tell that they're starting to get more familiar with each other and they're starting to gel well on both ends on the floor. I love the fact that Dana Evans has stepped up and really took over that backup point guard role. She has blossomed in that role. I love the fact that, you know, they seem like they're hungry again. They're like that hunger is back to win another championship. And on top of all that, bringing the effect of KFC, Kalia Copper coming back. That's a huge impact for them as well. So there's just a lot of components within the Sky that is really that's helping this team turn the corner and taking it in the route back to the title, especially since last year around this time, they were right at 500 or below 500 at one point with Candace Parker missing the beginning part of the season. Now they're starting to get it's a completely different turnaround this season. Talk about what you've been seeing and how it's and what they're doing now is affecting the upward trajectory of where this championship team is going.
Yeah, you made some excellent points. Before I touch on that, I want to make sure you bring some attention one more time to Brittany Griner being wrongfully detained over in Russia.
Yes.
We need her back home, regardless of the basketball dynamic of her. We just need her back home. This is ridiculous. All right, that aside, looking at the reigning champion Sky, what can't you say about this team through 10 games? They sit at 7-3. They're currently 3rd in the WNBA. With Kalia Copper back in the rotation, they are, I believe, 7-1, either 7-1 or 8-1. I believe it's actually 8-1 with her in the lineup. So you kind of just look at the way this team is adding bringing together all of the talents that they have, and comparing it to the teams that we're expecting to be in that same realm as them. And also factoring in that they have another guard that should be a part of their rotation, and Julie Alamine, who's coming over from her play overseas. I forget exactly which league she's competing in right now
Euro
overseas,
League.
but her team's in the Euro League. Her team's in the championship right now. They're wrapping up. She should be. I believe Coach Wade said in his press conference to us last week that she should be home sometime at the end of this week. So that's going to be the final piece to this team kind of progressing towards what we're going to be expecting to see rotation wise the rest of the way. So looking at as you mentioned, Josh, the looming dynamic that is Emma Mieseman. She is everything, and this is not to bash Stephanie Dawson in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Emma's just better. She's not just better for the Sky. She's just a better player in general, and she's already shown that through 10 games. And Coach Wade, without saying that directly, because obviously he's a head coach and he can't say things like that, but he's kind of subtly hinted at feeling like Emma's a better choice as far as being a piece to put next to Candace Parker in the front court, and also play with Azurá Stevens and play all three of those front court pieces at the same time. Emma's just been a godsend from the offensive end, being a connector, whether it's the dribble handoff scenarios, playmaking from the post, um, spacing the floor and shooting, being a screener and passing on the short roll, doing all those things, to even more so on the defensive end where she's able to hedge out, she's able to play at the level, she's able to play a short drop, causes a whole bunch of deflections on the ball and off the ball. She's tagging rollers, she's pill switching with guards. She's literally doing everything. And a lot of the stuff that she's doing outside of the steals and blocks shows up, don't show up on the stat sheet, where it's like the little things of communication. She'll scram guards out of mismatches in the post, and then put the other team in the rest of the clock because they thought they saw a mismatch and then it's not there. She's coming over at help, doubling on the block on drivers. She's doing like literally everything, and she's doing it so consistently that the Sky in turn are now from that shortly over 500 start that they had. Now they're 7-3 with a lot of breathing room over that threshold, and they're really starting to hit that blend in terms of getting all of the things that they need offensively with those things that they need defensively and combining them to start showing semblances of that team that they had last season with potential to punch even more than that because they're so much better early on and they have even more pieces for James Wade to have in his rotation long term as they continue to mesh those talents and skill sets together.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest components too that we have to mention is the rookie herself, Rebecca Gardner. She has brought a huge defensive. She's emerging as a two-way player for this franchise, but at the same time, she's making her staple on the defensive end, and it's showing and becoming a huge help, especially when you pair her in that second unit next to Dana. That's what it keeps the team afloat until you bring in the starters back in with, especially when you play her even on alongside KFC and Kalia. That's very dangerous lineup that Wade has an option to mix with. And especially when you're talking about focusing on a defensive end within the perimeter, which is something that I think he may eventually go down the line using a lot more often, as long as Gardner continues to improve not just within a role defensively, but even more offensively, which is a huge boost for the Chicago Sky team as a whole. So those are things that we have that's happening with the Sky, and the season's looking bright. And we'll see how far in the Sky that they touch. And I see you got a point you might want to briefly harp on, Steve.
Yeah, because see, you can't bring up Rebecca Gardner and not continue to hit on just how impactful she is defensively. So in terms of the Sky's lineups that they've used this season, regardless of whether Kai was here or Kai was still overseas or coming back home or whatever, just looking at the amount of time on the court that those lineups have had outside of the starters with Kylie and Copper, the second most used lineup has been the starters minus Quigley and with Rebecca Gardner in the lineup. And one of the best points you could bring up is that last game on Friday against the Atlanta Dream, where they had the rookie stud Ryan Howard that they were up against, and they used her in a multitude of ways on the ball and off the ball. Mm-hmm. And being able to pair, like you mentioned, being able to pair Rebecca Gardner's efforts with Kylie Copper's, now you can put one of those women on the ball and take Ryan Howard's responsibility, and then put the other one off the ball to wreak havoc in passing lanes. and that's quite literally what James Wade did with their plan of attack against Ryan on Friday. They literally put one of those two on the ball, let the other one work off the ball, and they were able to take away essentially both sideline actions simultaneously and force the Dream into a lot of late clock situations. And that, I feel like, was their first test against the elite wing offensive weapon to pair those two against. And the returns were ridiculous. I believe Ryan had her second lowest usage percentage, and then she had her second worst efficiency-wise scoring game, and her second lowest scoring total as well. So being such a score-first phenom and being able to be held in check by two veteran defensive wings, I feel like that's just a great example of what can become even more resounding as far as an effective impact on the Sky defense, just between those two individually, not even talking about what everybody else did defensively. So I feel like that was a great point for you to bring up with bringing up Rebecca Gardner. And if it wasn't for Ryan Howard, I feel like she would have a lot more say-so in the rookie of the year, the rookie of the year race. But, you know, she's going to run away with that eventually, and rightfully so. But, yeah, just had to definitely bring that up with Rebecca.
They got more depth than I ever seen, man, compared to last year. I mean, what I like about it the most is it allows you to keep the vets fresh, you know, from Slew and Quigley, you know, doing what they do. Like Wade got a lineup, man, where he could pretty much go like 9 deep, you know, and that's something that is gonna make them a real intriguing watch, you know, moving forward. You can tell that they taking a start to this season very personally, you know, after the way they started last year, you know, playing, you know, 500 ball, sub 500 ball, you know, got people in and out the lineup. You can tell they really taking first, you know, half of the season very seriously, and they trying to set the tone early to make sure that they put themselves in a great position come playoff time.
Most definitely, man. We'll be definitely checking the Sky out throughout the rest of the season, and also checking out to see what how many All-Stars we're gonna have for the team when we're playing the All-Star game when they come to Chicago next month. So definitely gonna be on the lookout for that as we continue to cover the game, cover the season for the Chicago Sky. We are in the building, literally and figuratively. We are in the building with the Sky, man. So definitely be on the lookout for all of that and the great work that guys like Steven and our man Chris are doing and covering the Chicago Sky. And as we wrap up this show, we're gonna end a note on a very good note because we talk about Chicago Sky. Chicago Sky have one player on the team who is from, you know, DePaul. She a real Blue Demon. She's a part of the Blue Demon family, Alec Quigley. We're gonna continue with the Blue Demon family aspect because Coach Stubbs is getting these recruits, boy. He's getting them. Mm-hmm. They coming to the shot, man. They just picked up another recruit recently, class of 2023 4-star player, power forward, Tafari Gobert. And man, Coach Stubbs he's not playing any games. He has a lot to do with rebuilding the culture of DePaul, which I believe he's done a great job in so far this season or this past season. Javon, you know, Freeman Liberty set the tone for the team moving forward as he's now, you know, going through the NBA draft process and recently reportedly had a workout with the hometown Bulls. So we wish him nothing but the best with that. But they're setting the tone for next year and years to come. And he's already had a top recruit, I believe, in Nelson Cruz coming through. You adding now. Yeah. So now you over here adding another top 23 recruit. One of the things I've always heard and known was Coach Stubbs, if he can coach, but one thing he can do is recruit. And he is getting those guys coming from the high school ranks and even the transfer portal coming to DePaul. But they have a lot of shoes to fill. They lost David Jones this year. He's transferring to St. John's. You also lost, you know, veteran leadership from Brandon Johnson. You also lost Javon to the draft. You have Nick Agenda coming back, even because he, you know, stepped away from the draft process and opted to go back to school. So that is something that, you know, DePaul has going for them. But knowing Coach Stubbs and that circle in general, they're trying to make noise next year. And they did I think they sent a very good statement this year. They didn't win a lot of games per se, but they already doubled their win total from the last year David Lato was there. And on top of that, you also sent a message competitively. I want to say half of the conference games that they played were all decided by 5 points or less. So you're talking about from a competitive perspective, DePaul is bringing the heat, slowly but surely bringing the heat, and adding that recruit. Dare I say, Gabe, not just Blue Demon basketball's back.
I'm not gonna say it's back yet, but it's on the rise, and I think it's in a good place. Because I've been following the program since I've been there, like since I touched down on campus fall of 11. So I mean, it's been some rough years, but it's promising. You can tell that they got a real coach in the building. And I got to give credit to Paris Parham. His one of the lead assistants, Bino Ranson, and those guys. They've been out in the field working too. As much as Stubbs has been an excellent recruiter dating back to his days at Oregon, he has a hell of a coaching staff besides him. I think I like where they're going, and they showed progress last season. Competing in games, beating some top teams in Wintrust, such as Seton Hall, beating Marquette on senior night. That I can't even recall last time that they beat Marquette in their own building, at home. In front of the fans.
Didn't
so that
they
was
give UConn a scare as well?
Yeah. They competed with UConn for a bit. I like where they're going, and I think they're gonna have a nice backcourt with Zion Cruz and Ahmad Bynum, Will Bynum's nephew, who redshirted this year, who will be in the mix. They're gonna be loaded at the guard spot. I just worry about them from the big, but if they could build off of the momentum that they have put together in year one, I think they got a chance to do some great things. If you a program like DePaul, you would take like 6+ wins in the conference like they got last year, if I'm not mistaken. They didn't even finish last. So that was a big improvement. You think about all the years since they've been in the Big East, they've been down. I won't say they back yet though, but they definitely on the rise, and it's a great thing to see. And last time I checked, they still in the running for Imani Bates.
I was gonna mention that.
He hadn't even chosen school yet, and he in the top 6. So if they can get him in the mix, it's gonna get real interesting. Then I might have to say, hey, it's looking real good.
I feel you, man. I mean, definitely gonna have to make an emphasis to check out some of these Blue Demon games next year, man. Over there at Wintrust, because when Wintrust is rocking, hey man, there's nothing like it when you talk about the city of Chicago having basketball at an elite level like Paul has the potential of where they're trying to take it. That being said, man, this wraps up the show. Thank you for running with us because, as you can see, we don't stop running. We keep it going fast break style, and we have done all week. I mean, we just getting started. We got so much going on with Chicago Sky Play. We're obviously gonna keep in touch with the Bulls. And the WNBA as a whole. Brittany Griner, we need you to come home. We want you to come home, so let's continue to support, do everything we can to get her home, as well as support the WNBA as a whole. If you're a true basketball fan, come check out these games, man. Watch these games. Support and invest in these games because they are the real deal. And moving forward with my guys, man, Steve and Gabe, is there anything you would like to say to the audience from any projects coming up that we need to highlight and make sure that our audience pays attention to?
Go ahead, Gabe.
Not at this time, man. I mean, I'm just watching a lot of basketball, watching the finals, definitely watching the Sky, trying to check out and see, what's going on in the local scene. I just got some good news today about my alma mater, St. Rita, with Morez Johnson and James Brown making the under-17 USA basketball team. So shout out to them guys, man. And Rashawn Russell, who's building that program up, just got a big-time transfer out of Lamont. The 2 spot, I forget the kid's name, but he's putting up like 20 and 5, I think, in Lamont. And, they playing a nationally ranked schedule. So it's all around in the city. It's a lot of great things going on. And like you said, Josh, people definitely need to pay attention to it and check it out.
Well, for me, just keeping an eye out for everything pertaining to the WNBA. Definitely a lot more stories, a lot more film sessions, and just everything in general regarding to covering the Chicago Sky and the WNBA as a whole. And please watch those games because, as Josh said in the opening to this closing segment, the WNBA is a lot of high-level basketball being played. If you're a fan of basketball in general, you're going to enjoy these games. So if you haven't already started, it's the perfect time. A lot of teams are starting to establish their identities and starting to get pieces back from overseas as well. So teams are beginning to kind of mesh and put things together. So this is the perfect time to start paying attention and keeping an eye out on the scoreboards and actually watching the games and supporting these women because they're playing high level basketball, as well as supporting the NBA Finals. I have a few more stories coming regarding different things pertaining to that as well. So yeah, a lot of basketball being played at a high level right now. Just make sure you making deposits and attention to all of it and not just one segment of it.
Most definitely, man. Steve over here talking about making deposits. We out here cashing checks because we over here continuing to put stuff out on a consistent basis. And you can follow all of that content on WARR Media on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, you name it. We're all over the place. You can catch the podcast version of our shows on WARR on Anchor, which is on all podcast platforms, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, you name it. We are all over the place, constantly giving you all types of content. And just be on the lookout for that because this is just getting started, man. We're just getting started. So just continue to check out the work that we do as we continue to provide the content for you to check out, man. And in the meantime, out of all of this, as our boss, our founder, Kyle Means always says, and our runner, keep bouncing.